believe in the power of you. And, if someone had told me that when I was, younger, I might have been like, oh yeah, whatever. But actually taking time to actually reflect back and think about what I've achieved, that is absolutely the kind of the motto or the strap line that kind of sits with me. And the reason why I say that is because I think being your authentic self in whatever you choose to do and not focusing on replicating what you're assuming the role or the persona should look like. It's very obvious when you're in a world and you're out of your comfort zone. And actually being a bit more confident of what you bring and spending that time internalizing and understanding yourself and what you bring to the table really, really will serve you well. My name is Jasmine Campbell. I go by Jazz. It's Jasmine when I'm in trouble. I have lived in London for all of my life, and that is many, many years. I am a daughter. My mother is of African descent, and she came to the UK from Sierra Leone in the early 70s, where she had me. I am happily married with two amazing children. One is 21 and just entered into the world of work after studying at York University, and a 13-year-old son who's kind of loving life at school at the moment. In terms of my role, so I'm a senior manager. I work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, known as PwC. Which is an international professional services firm, widely known as being an accounting firm, but however, they do a number of other services, so consulting, deals, risk assurance, and other areas. In terms of where I sit within PwC, so I work within the diversity, equity and inclusion practice within the people and organisation practice. And I guess the key kind of element of my role is really supporting clients who are aiming to invest and make commitments around creating more diverse workforce, a more diverse environment, so they can attract top diverse talent. They can foster greater innovation in terms of the improved financial performance that they may get from having a result of a diverse kind of thought into their business model and what they're trying to do. And this is really, really important in terms of achieving fairer and more equitable outcomes for broader society as well. In terms of the day-to-day of my role, so this kind of I've summarized it, but I'll say it again, kind of consists of advising and supporting my clients to deliver on those diversity, equity and inclusion commitments and ambitions. And, I'm quite fortunate that I've landed in this role where I'm doing something that I'm truly, truly passionate about. And I'll explain a bit more later, but the qualifications didn't really get me here. It was a bit around just the attitude and keep on pushing forward, which has landed me in the work I'm doing today. Born and bred in East London, and I grew up on the streets of East London. My mother, as a single Black African woman who came to London in the 70s and the areas we lived in, I definitely experienced, we all did, me, my mother and my family experienced racism on a daily basis. And there were definitely some moments in my childhood or things that I witnessed that, was not very nice. But in terms of the way I grew up with a very determined and resilient mother who had come here to be a nurse and not be a nurse, continue on in her career as a nurse, because she was a nurse before she arrived in the UK, but had to retrain in this country. But I definitely had her as someone who was definitely a role model and still remains to be a role model in terms of the resilience she showed in picking herself up and moving on and just being very adamant that she was here to do a job and she was going to do that job, whatever that took, and how she was going to navigate that. And I guess, growing up and entering into through my school days and going into education, I definitely now I reflect, see myself as someone who was very fun-loving, very caring, and I guess that comes from my mother's nurturing kind of demeanour, empathetic. So often, individuals around me at school where they were having troubles, it would always be me who would be in there trying to calm them down, or the teachers would go, Jez, can you have a word? I definitely, I think the adversity and some of the challenges that we had to experience, I think led me down a road where I was very personable and empathetic and aware of how others felt in certain scenarios, and always have had that in mind, and that's kind of driven me. Through school and from in an education perspective, how do I put this? I guess I worked really hard at school. But actually, when it got to the crux of GCSEs, my results never talked to the effort that I had put into the work that I had done. And I think going on that, through my education, and I guess through those years growing up and entering into work, and actually through my early career, and I'll come on to that in a minute, I definitely felt less than. I definitely, had been impacted by being, labelled as being lazy, being labelled as, you're not telling the truth, you're not putting in the time, because these results surely cannot be, reflective if you had put in the time, etc. And it turns out that I have a very different way of processing and learning and doing things, and that was only discovered very, very recently, having been diagnosed as dyslexic about 6 years ago. So, but through and not knowing that, then it was a really, really, really challenging time. But having said that, I think that drive of being very resilient, always pushing, always trying to make something and do something with myself rather than giving up and saying it's not going to happen, I think has served me well. And at the end of school, rather than going to college or university, I stayed on in sixth form, and I entered into a secretarial course where I did quite well as a touch typist, maybe because I didn't have to look at the letters. I just needed to know where they were on the keyboards. I kind of assumed. But I then did quite well with the exams for that, and the teachers actually applied for us to join the civil service. So my first job was in the Royal Courts of Justice as a typist, and to cut a long story short, I navigated a 20-year career in the civil service, from starting as a typist, moving over to kind of the admin side of the business for the court service, then moving into roles like risk manager, change manager, a court clerk, and navigated this whilst kind of meeting my husband, having my first child, but always with the mindset of not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to roll up my sleeves and try something new, and just wanting to explore and see what else was out there and have a go at it. So through my first kind of 20 years of a career, I really did still have challenges. I still found that the effort I was putting in felt like it was the same or equal to what others were doing, but the results or the product or the report or what I'd handed over, there was always critique around, there's the same feedback. You need to work on X, you need to work on Y. And then even still then, I didn't know why that was. And then about in 2012, I after having my second child, who was born in 2009, I decided to move on from the civil service and look for other opportunities. And having had the opportunity whilst in the civil service to go on to secondment within PwC, I reached out to managers that I'd worked with when I was there, who had seen how I grafted, who had seen kind of how I perform, and fortunately was afforded a role within the firm. So I've been with the firm nearly 10 years, well, over 10 years now. And similarly, I think it's right that I've navigated a career in the firm. And I think it's important to kind of highlight here, I guess this was landing at PwC, very different world to public sector. So very corporate world. The way kind of they do business and do work is very different because it is, one is taxpayers' money, and it's, a bit of, you don't want to go on the other side to the private sector because it's all a very different world. And the other one is the private sector, where it's very much around, which I find is my sweet spot, about knowing what a problem is and helping our clients to solve those important problems. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can do that in accounting. I can help you with your numbers and tell you, your numbers all reconcile, or I can actually be really, really kind of creative and innovative and work with you to give you the best outcome for you. And that's really the ethos that I go with when I work with the clients that I work with. But I guess in terms of where I'm at now, working within the diversity, equity and inclusion team, I've been with the PwC, as I said, for 10 years. And whilst that's a long period of time, I've been able to use my gut, use my slowly growing and increasing confidence that was gained through having sponsorship and mentorship, and a career coach and people guiding me through the environment that I was in. And actually peers and team members and, not grade related, a number of people were around me who were able to help me share my voice a bit more in terms of my experience. So, being really passionate about D&I, landing in an organization where, I'm a Black female, I'm, neurodivergent. And at the, beginning stages, I didn't even know that. But when that came to the fore, it was, okay, how do we support you? Which was a brilliant environment to be in. Being older, because obviously I'm not even going to say how old I am, but being older and non-uni educated, coming from a socioeconomic background of a single mother, etc. It's a natural conversation I have, and I've been having this both internally with my colleagues within PwC, having sat on their staff diversity council, as well as supporting my clients around, how do we unlock the true potential of the talent that we're bringing into our organizations? And effectively, I've been within this team for a few months now, but prior to the team I'm in, I've been working in the D&I and the kind of the S of ESG, the social impact space, sustainability space for, 2-3 years now. So I feel quite privileged to actually be doing what I do on the day to day, because it's something that's truly, truly important to me. The motto I tend to go to, or the thing that I tell my children, I tell my partner, I tell the loved ones around me, I tell people in my teams is, believe in the power of you. And, if someone had told me that when I was, younger, I might have been like, oh yeah, whatever. But actually taking time to actually reflect back and think about what I've achieved, that is absolutely the kind of the motto or the strap line that kind of sits with me. And the reason why I say that is because I think being your authentic self in whatever you choose to do, and not focusing on replicating what you're assuming the role or the persona should look like. It's very obvious when you're in a world and you're out of your comfort zone. and actually being a bit more confident of what you bring, and spending that time internalizing and understanding yourself and what you bring to the table really, really will serve you well. And I guess the reason why I say that is because for so many years, so many people have said to me, Jazz, you're such a people person. You're really good with people. You're really passionate in how you come across. People really buy into what you're saying. You're so caring. You see things that others don't really care about. And I've always belittled that because I'm looking at what others are doing and how they're carrying themselves and how quickly they can turn around a presentation or report, or how eloquently, measured it comes across. And by doing that, I belittle or I ignore how what I do comes across and how I am reaches other people that not everyone might not feel they're being reached with, So I think believing in the power of you, being your authentic self, is really, really important. I think the thing that underpins that from a future leader's perspective is understanding that leaders come in many different forms. It's not necessarily always the person that's at the front or at the top that's the real true leader. I often throw in influence, the influence you have. But equally, you need to be amongst it. And sometimes you're amongst it and you're doing and you're rolling up your sleeves and you're being your authentic self. And unbeknown to you, you're inspiring others to come through as leaders. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the role might be, and I feel partly this is my bit, right? I'm going to everyone, come on the journey. I'm going to take you and you go forward, and it's about not feeling like there's one size fits all. Understanding and focusing on your strengths, believing in the power of you, and absolutely, refining that, leaning into that, and actually using that to navigate the career path or the journey that's going to be right for you. And I think if you've got clarity around that and what that looks like, resilience, being proactive, being inquisitive, exploring, thinking innovatively, thinking creatively, thinking different ways is really, really what we want, right? I talked about diversity of thought. Talked about bringing different perspectives from different walks of life, and the work we're doing in broader society around equity, creating an environment where everyone can thrive. It's really important that people do feel more comfortable about being their authentic self and believing in themselves in terms of what they can achieve.